I am so happy to be here. And if you will remember last, I was here October, I think it was 19th or 20th. It was the day before I was going to leave on a 3-week trip to India. And that day, I promised you that I would come back December 14th and tell you about my trip. And just to let you know what, oh, share. Yes. Oops, okay. How come this isn't working here? Okay, I need to back out of it. Escape, okay. Zoom, okay, here I am, Zoom, share. Okay, I've already messed up my slides. Okay, share. All right, go back to this. And full screen. You can tell I am not technologically astute. Okay, slide up slideshow. Uh-oh. I think, what do I just cancel that? This one? Okay. It worked when I was practicing beforehand. But, oh well. And it's being recorded right now, so yeah, I messed up. And I think there are people from my trip who are actually Zooming. So they're watching me fumble around. Anyway, so I'm here today for your Vista Buddhist Temple family service. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Ellen Crane Sensei from Orchani Buddhist Church. And very excited to tell you about this trip. And my great concern is that I'm going to talk too long, go too long, and that you may get bored. I have a couple spots during this talk where if Dharma school students leave, they get permission to go because it's getting too long and too boring. But what I wanted to tell you is this was an amazing trip, and to condense 3 weeks of an amazing adventure into about 20 minutes is going to be very difficult. So I may go over a little bit, but you can let me know if I've gone too long. Okay, so, okay, now how do I get to the next slide? Okay, so this was called Bob's Heart of India Spiritual Seekers Tour. And there are 3 people in this room who are responsible for me actually going on this trip. One is sitting right here, my friend Lila Grant, who is my friend from OCBC. Back there is Ricky Schlesinger, and on the Nijing, or was on the Nijing, was Judy Nakatomi. So the 2 of them went last year with Bob on a tour of India in southern India. And Bob announced that he was going to be doing this tour of northern India. Lila went to a retreat up at the Jodo Shinshu Center in Berkeley that Bob was running, because I'm going to tell you a little bit about Bob's background and his certification. But she came back wildly excited. Bob's going to do this trip of India, and we need to go. So, of course, she convinced me that I should go on this trip, and she was going to go with her husband, Rick. Tom was not so interested. He was going to just let me go by myself. And then Lila ended up not going. So but I did talk to Ricky and Judy about the trip, and they said, you need to go, this is an amazing trip. They did southern India, this is going to be a completely different trip, and it would be amazing because Bob is amazing. So I took their word for it. I knew nobody that was going to be going. I did have an encounter with Bob subsequently, after Lila went on this yoga retreat with him the following year, where we worked with him to do a yoga and Buddhism retreat at OCBC. And I got to know Bob a little bit better. Lila kind of introduced us. We put on a fantastic yoga and Buddhism, it was a one-day seminar. I know that Bob also came to Vista the following day to do a similar kind of experience here at the Vista Temple. Anyway, so over the course of a year, Bob insisted that everybody that signed up needed to Zoom once a month to prepare for this trip. So starting in updates and talk about the trip to prepare ourselves. We exchanged bios of each other. In my case, I didn't know anybody. So for me, this is really valuable. Nobody I knew was going. My husband wasn't going, of course. Lila and Rick weren't going to go now. And Rick and Judy said that they would be interested in going, except for the fact that they had done a similar trip to India several years ago with a group from Deer Park, from the Thich Nhat Hanh line. So nobody I knew was going to go. But I figured I'm going to enjoy myself no matter what. So I ended up going. So this is a screenshot I took right before I landed. We took an Air India flight from San Francisco because that's where most of the people were in Northern California. So I had to fly up the day before, spend a night in a hotel, and then join the group in San Francisco. And this was just 5 miles left to get to Delhi, which is where we landed. And I was greeted there by this man, who's kind of scary looking. His name is Rahul Kant, and he was our tour guide, an amazing human being who I got to know over the next 3 weeks. And I have more to talk about him as we go along. But this is me after a 17-and-a-half-hour flight from San Francisco. I don't wear my contacts when I travel because your eyes dry out in the airplane. And so I'm getting the traditional flower garland reception, and this is our giant orange luxury bus, and the man behind Raul is our bus driver, amazing bus driver who we all fell in love with. The roads in India are insane, and you need somebody who really knows how to drive well, and our bus driver was incredible. So this is my group. There were 24 of us, including Bob. But some interesting statistics about my group was that there were 6 couples, if you include a mother-son as a couple. But so 12 people, half the group were kind of couples. But then there were another 12 of us who were kind of solo travelers. 4 men, including Bob, and 8 women. And we were solo either because our partners didn't want to go, or they were just naturally solo. So it was kind of an interesting mix of people. There were some people who were related. There were 3 couples who were kind of familially related, their sister and their partners, and a cousin and his wife. There was a family, a couple with a sister, so there were 3 of them. There were 2 cousins. There were also eight people who had gone on. So a third of the group already knew each other. They had experienced India last year and had gone with Bob. In our group, we had 3 Steves, 3 Janices, and 2 Susans. 2 of the Janices and 2 of the Steves were married to each other. So it was kind of confusing when you called Steve, like half the group turned around, or Janice. People, you had to be very specific. So it got a little bit confusing, but we did sort everybody out. There were 14 people from Northern California, 3 from Southern. It turned out there was another couple who Roz knows very well that live in the Los Angeles area. And so I met them for the first time. So we were the 3 from Southern California, then 2 from Central Cal. And surprisingly, there were 6 people not living in Salt Lake City, but somehow have Salt Lake City in their background. So that was kind of an interesting place to be associated to. And then one person was from Vancouver, British Columbia. So she was kind of like me, sort of an outlier. And then there were about 13 people who had some Buddhist temple affiliation. So not everybody was Buddhist. They were, just there to have an experience with Bob. Some of them had some connection to Bob through his yoga, because he does do online yoga for 3 temples, and then so some of the people had connections with him through that way. So here we have a interesting group of people. Oh, and we had one person who was of Indian descent, and his name was Rohit. And he was quite an outlier because, first of all, he was young. He was in his 30s. He was single, and he was of Indian descent, but his parents, who were of Indian descent from Punjab, had never been to India. They had been raised in Fiji. And so they moved to the United States, and Rohit actually was raised, he might have been born in Fiji, but he was raised in the US. And so when he was part of the group that had gone to India last year and had kind of connected, particularly, well, with the culture, but also with Rahul, our leader. And the two of them were kind of like and I don't know why Tibet is in this bright red color, although Tibet is very important in this trip. But anyway, so this is the map, and what I'm going to explain to you is that our trip was kind of divided into 3 segments. So this middle segment, can you see my cursor? You can see my arrow, right? So this is kind of the one part of the trip. Then another part of the trip is this section here, and then the last part of the trip is this section. All of these places are really far away from each other, and that meant long bus rides or long car rides. Sometimes we flew, and it was amazing how inexpensive it was to fly as many times as we flew to get to like really far places. But India's a big country, and even though we were just in northern India, it was still pretty far to go. So I'll kind of narrow this down. So the first part of our trip is kind of right here in this middle section. We flew into Delhi, and the first thing we did was go to Agra to see the Taj Mahal, and then we went to Jaipur, and I'll tell you about that. And then we went to this place called the Ranthambore National Tiger Reserve to see tigers. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about this first part of the trip. And this is our 5-star hotel, an example of it. I showed this, sent this to my son. He goes, wow, this isn't what I expected from India. And wasn't what I expected either. But I have to say the accommodations were lovely the whole time. They did a super job in providing us fantastic hotels. So this is the only one I'm going to show you. So one of the first places we went to on the way to Agra was to see these 2 places. This is called the Mini Taj Mahal, and the other place is called the the Agra Fort. And I really liked this sign that was at the outside of the Mini Taj. I mean, all these things that you are prohibited from doing. I thought, well, that's a really fun kind of sign. So anyway, that's why I took a picture of them. By the way, how many Dharma school children do we have here? I see 1, 2. Okay. All right. So you're going to be allowed to leave whenever you get bored. So I do have a few stopping places, but maybe I hope you'll be interested enough to stay at least for a while. I was mostly concerned about preschool and up to the 3rd grade, attention span, because this might get a little bit long, even though I'm going to try to go quicker. I already talked a lot. Okay. Oh, what happened to my Taj Mahal picture? Okay, well, this is one of the first places that we did go to, was a Mother Teresa facility. Apparently, she established a new order called the Missionaries of Charity. And it's kind of worldwide, and in India, she has something like 40 establishments where she caters to destitute people and children, and so we went to one in Agra, and this is the one that we visited. This one was particularly for women who were destitute and for handicapped children. So we got to tour some of this, and we also made a donation. They just kind of asked if we would do a donation, and so everybody kind of put in whatever amount that they wanted, but they were very grateful. And I didn't take any pictures of people because sometimes I didn't want to, be intrusive. So these are just some pictures of the facility. But that was a very meaningful visit, and of course, this is a Catholic organization. So we also went to a place, to Jaipur. So this was, we went from, and I don't know what I have, well, I guess I only showed you one picture of the Taj Mahal. Oh yeah, I guess I used all those pictures up earlier. Anyway, the Taj Mahal was what we went to visit on the 3rd day that we were in Agra. You have seen pictures of the Taj Mahal, and pictures do not do it justice. It is massive and so impressive. I just thought, oh, we're going to see the Taj Mahal, and I was excited about it, but I wasn't prepared for the grandeur and the immensity of the building. So if you ever get an opportunity, has anyone been to see the Taj Mahal? Okay, some of you have seen it. So you know what I'm talking about. It is so impressive, and it was spectacular and so beautiful. And a wonderful love story, which I have no time to talk to you about, but it's based on a beautiful story. So from Agra, we drove to Jaipur, which is about another 6 hours. It took us 4 hours to get to Agra, about another 6 hours by bus to get to Jaipur. And this is called the Pink City, and we went to see the Amber Fort, and this is where we had our elephant adventure. So apparently last year they tried to do elephants in southern India, and it rained and they couldn't do it, so Bob wanted to make sure that we had elephants this time. So we got to sit on an elephant and rock around, and the thing that was kind of annoying, but they told us beforehand, is that we were supposed to ignore the hawkers. There was people constantly trying to sell you things and artifacts and, trinkets and souvenirs. So they were incessant, and it was really hard to ignore them. But the elephant ride was fun. Next, we went south to the Ranthambore National Park, which has the Ranthambore Tiger Reserve. And we're all excited. We're going to go see tigers and wild animals. And this is the closest I got to a tiger on the picture. Never saw a tiger. The day that they allocated 2 days for us to go in the reserve and to try to see a tiger. Well, this reserve is huge, and there's something like, 80 tigers in total in this gigantic national park. But tigers are territorial. So they're only going to be in their own territory. So each has their own maybe very difficult to see a tiger. So it happened that the day that we went on this quote unquote safari, we each got assigned to one of 7 or 8 open air Jeeps. And it was pouring rain. So we all get into our Jeeps with this rain coming down, and it took us a while to get to whatever gate we were assigned. So for 2.5 hours, we were just roaming around in this park on these muddy, wet roads, getting pelted with rain, and we did see a few wild animals, but no tigers. And I wore every stitch of like rain gear, waterproof shoes, hats. They gave us a pink rain jacket. But for waterproof shoes, if rain's coming in from the top of your boot, that's not going to keep your feet wet. We came back from this trip so wet. Everybody was completely soaked. And the only thing that saved our group was the fact that I had a massage appointment back at the hotel at a certain time, and I said, I got to get back to my appointment. So we cut our tour by about half an hour, but everybody was completely soaked, and it took a few days to get like my shoes dry. I was using the hair dryer. I used all my, when our son was a hockey player, he used to have very smelly hockey boots. So I used all the techniques that I remembered from those hockey days to dry out my shoes. Anyway, we did see, some people saw bear. We saw lots of deer-like animals. Some people, we saw peacocks. I mean, we saw a few animals, but no tigers. Nobody saw a tiger. And we found out later that it's kind of a come on because it's really hard to see a tiger, but it was still fun. Okay, so that's kind of the first part of the trip in this middle section. Yeah, this middle section here. So then we were at the Tiger Reserve at the last. We drove 6 hours to get to Jaipur, and then we flew in a plane to Amritsar. So that's kind of in even more northern India. And there, we didn't spend a whole lot of time, but we did go to this place, and it's called the Golden Temple. This place is a temple that is based on the Sikh religion. And you see this man here with the Sikh turban. Very characteristic that, that kind of turban. This temple is gorgeous, and it's surrounded, you can see me standing in front of this giant lake. And so when we go to this temple, you have to take your shoes off and you have to walk through water to, I guess, kind of cleanse your feet. So every place is marble, it's huge, and there were just lots and lots of people. But the thing that's really amazing about this temple is that it's open 24/7, and they offer free food to anybody that comes. They literally feed, well, I don't know if it's thousands, but hundreds of people a day. And it's anybody. You just walk off the street. It's not necessarily for poor people. It's just anyone that wants to come and eat. And so we were there kind of around lunchtime, and we watched all the people who prepare the food and how they serve it, and we actually had their food. It's all vegetarian, so you see the rice, and then this chapati, which is kind of like a tortilla. This little, it's kind of a chickpea dish, and then this brown part is dal, which is lentils, and then this other part at the bottom was kind of a sweet potato. It was all very delicious, and people walk around with these big buckets of food, and they give you water if you want it, but there were just hundreds of people in here just having lunch, and it was quite a production, very impressive. And like I said, they're open 24/7. So what Raul wrote to us about Sikhism, I thought was interesting. Let's see if I can. Nope. I thought I wrote it down here. Okay. Anyway, it's Sikhism is a very peaceful kind of religion, and they believe in good works and helping others. I mean, like religions in general try to emphasize that, but they really put their money where their mouth is. I mean, they feed hundreds of people, thousands of people in a year, and it's an amazing production. And you can see all the women here that are in their saris. That was something that I was really amazed with. They do wear saris and their traditional wear most of the time. Everybody is dressed that way, and I think you noticed that as well. Okay, so from Amritsar, we left, and at that point, we were in a 9-car caravan, because going up to Dharamsala to see the Dalai Lama, he's at the foothills of the Himalayas, and that is through very kind of windy roads, and it was one of the most harrowing rides I ever took. And parts of it was supposedly on expressways, but these roads are under construction for great parts of it, and we're bouncing along and going through potholes, and it was a 6-hour ride over bumpy, bad roads. And then when we got to the mountains, kind of winding our way up to Dharamsala, which is sort of perched on the side of a mountain. And it's at about 5,000 feet, so it's about the same height as Denver, about a mile high. So it was quite cool, very comfortable. I mean, India is kind of a hot country, but when we were in Dharamsala, it was very comfortable because temperatures were in the 70s most of the time. Kind of cool in the morning, in the upper 50s. So beautiful mountains. This was a view from our hotel room. And the main feature, there is a town there, and one area of Dharamsala is called McLeod Ganj. And this is a very kind of crowded and busy town, you can see, but monks walk the streets, and there's a lot of commerce and shops and restaurants. But the main attraction or reason why there are so many people there is because it's become kind of a refuge for Tibetans in exile, and that includes the Dalai Lama. And so he is also in Dharamsala. When he escaped from Tibet in 1959, there was what was called the Tibetan Uprising. As you may or may not know, in the 50s, China invaded Tibet, basically took over the country. They started suppressing Tibetans, and there was, in 1959, an uprising that led to a lot of people being killed, and a lot of Tibetans left Tibet. And they went into Nepal, they went into India, and that included the Dalai Lama. If any of you ever saw the movie 7 Years in Tibet with Brad Pitt, it highlights that story of the Dalai Lama as he lived in Tibet in Lhasa, which is the capital of Tibet, and how he grew up and had this encounter with this European man who was the Brad Pitt character, and how he explained and taught the Dalai Lama many things about the West. So anyway, in 1959, the 14th Dalai Lama escaped Tibet and went to India, and then established a government in exile in Dharamsala. So that's where he is housed today, and there is quite a large Tibetan community. So I did some research to find out, just how many Tibetans have left Tibet since that time. And there's something like 150,000 worldwide. I thought it was in the millions, but it isn't as large as I thought. The number that still remain in Tibet is close to 3.5 million, but worldwide there's something like 6 million Tibetans that are sort of scattered all over the world. Some are, closer by in Nepal and Bhutan, but Tibetans are a distinct ethnic group. And so I'll talk about this in a little bit later. So this is the HHDL means His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and he has his temple and monastery called Tsuglang Kang. I think that's how you pronounce it. But it's right there in Dharamsala in McLeod Ganj, which is sort of this upper part of Dharamsala city. And we had an audience with the Dalai Lama. It took about a year for Bob and Raul to prepare for us to have this audience. Bob wrote a letter to explain who we were, and he kind of equated the experience of our Issei parents, grandparents, coming to the United States and, and needing to feel a sense of community, and that there's some parallels to their Tibetan society in exile. And anyway, we got permission to have an audience. And so when we went, we couldn't take any cell phones. We couldn't take any kind of recording. I guess we could have taken one of those instant cameras. I think that might have been possible, but anything electronic we weren't allowed to take into this compound. And when we had the audience with His Holiness, it was kind of outside. He was in a sort of a veranda in an outdoor courtyard, and there were probably about 75 of us that was in our larger group, because we were a group of 24 or 5. And so one by one, we kind of lined up and got to go before the Dalai Lama. And he is now 90, and his capacities are rather diminished. I remember he came to Southern California a couple times, maybe 10 years ago. I saw him at UCI, at the Bren Center, and I also saw him at the Long Beach Convention Center. At that time, he was lively and engaging, and he was joking, and kind of, you think of the Dalai Lama as this very happy and warm and generous person. He was still that, but he wasn't able to really talk. But that didn't matter. It was that connection that he gave to every person. This is him as a much younger man. But this is a connection. He looks right into your eyes. He holds your hands. He touches your face. Everybody that was going before him, there were so many of us that were crying because it was such an emotional experience to be in his presence. You see this warmth and goodness and kindness that comes out of him even without words. And so I wore my robes like these because, who was it? I think Ricky suggested that I take my robes. I was trying to go very light on this trip, like carry on light. But I managed to put in a set of robes, and I put in what's called an okesa, one of these kind of cloths. And this really establishes the fact that I'm a minister. This is something that you get once you're ordained, and you go through that ordination process. So I had an okesa that was given to me last year, because last year the BCA, the Buddhist Churches of America, celebrated 125 years of being in North America. So we made up these special okesas. We also made ones for our regular members called montoshikishos, the shorter ones. And they on them they had a lot of agricultural things, because our Issei grandparents to America to fish and farm and to be in agriculture. So we wanted to depict an okesa that really captured this Issei spirit. So that was the okesa that I took with me to Dharamsala, and the one that I wore. And so when I got before the Dalai Lama, and you see that I have this white cloth. This is I forget what that's called, but that's a cloth that you see the Dalai Lama or Tibetan Buddha put on over people. In front of him, and I said I would. And I took off my okesa and I folded His Holiness. And so they interpreted that. And before he could get through all of his interpretation, he grabs it and he wraps it around his head. And he put it on. And so he wore this okesa. And I explained to him that this represents 125 years of Buddhism in America, and that it's, very meaningful to all of us that came to see him. And I don't know how much he understood. It was interpreted to him, and I don't know if he remembers any of it, but for me it was really meaningful. And I made sure I sent that picture to Bishop Harada. I wanted him to know that BCA was represented and that we had a presence before the Dalai Lama. And it was a very special moment, and something I won't ever forget. So after that, we were taken to some place called the Tibetan Children's Village. It was, in a different part of Dharamsala. So this was a school that was established for Tibetan children. So when the diaspora started happening, a lot of children were being sent to India to try to escape Tibet. And so what the Dalai Lama did was establish these TCVs, Tibetan children's villages. And there are now something like 8 of these. They're throughout India. There are many of these special schools, and they were to try to maintain the Tibetan culture for the Tibetan people that are here or, out of Tibet, because that culture is being suppressed in Tibet by the Chinese. And so they wanted to try to maintain their culture, their language, and so he established these schools that are attended by children. We did talk to one of the head directors of this particular school, and he said that the flow of children coming from Tibet has really slowed down. And I don't know if it's because of more suppression or people in general just aren't really being able to escape or allowed to leave Tibet. But what we saw there were wonderful, beautiful, happy children. A lot of them are orphans because they were sent by their families so that they could live in India. And they live in these dormitories. They have house facility. And I captured some very cute little children. So this was our experience there. They happened to be having a film festival going on their premises. So there was a little food festival, and so we all had lunch there. But it was a really moving experience for us. So I said, this might be a time for Dharma school children if they want to go. We're going to go on to the last part of the trip. So if you think they want to go, they can. So I'll just continue on then. Okay. Yeah, think I've talked about 30 minutes. So while we were in Dharamsala, we went to a monastery. This one is called Gyuto Karmapa Temple. Apparently, the Tibetans in India are well funded. This was an amazingly beautiful monastery, and there were lots of monks there. We saw them chanting. We couldn't take pictures of anything inside of a temple, but this was fascinating. We also went to Norbalinga Monastery, which is also not too far away, and this was a beautiful monastery, much more intimate, green, felt like a garden, and apparently was designed by a Japanese landscaper. And so this was just a beautiful, peaceful, quiet monastery, and apparently this is where the Dalai Lama would go. I couldn't remember, it probably was in the summer. It was his summer monastery. And this portrait here is of the Dalai Lama in the middle. So they had all of the various Dalai Lamas from the past, And this was our current Dalai Lama's picture, so you can kind of see his face. And then, of course, there's these prayer wheels everywhere, and they were fun to spin. So this is still part of the monastery. Very elaborate artwork, beautiful. So, okay, so the last part is we're going to go to Varanasi and Bodh Gaya. So what we did, oops. So what we did, I'm trying to use my pointer. Anyway, we went from Dharamsala, topmost star, and flew back to Delhi, because you can't go directly to any of these places. You have to always kind of go back to Delhi. So we flew to Delhi, and then we went on to Varanasi. And Varanasi was really important on our trip because it was, we timed our trip in order to be there for the Diwali Festival of Lights. And this is a huge festival that happens once a year, and it has to do with, it's a Hindu festival, and it honors the god Shiva. And apparently it's for people who come to, cleanse their sins, and I forget all the explanations that Raul gave us, but massive amounts of people. So this is a picture that we took almost at dawn. They got us up really early to go out on a boat before the sun came up so that we could see. We're on the Ganges River, which they call the Ganga. And so I have many pictures, and I really tried to limit how many pictures I took. But we went out in the morning, and then here you see people going into the Ganges River to bathe. I mean, it's a ritual bathing that occurs where people will go, and it's part of what they do. So on the right, you see us putting these little dishes with flowers and a candle, and it was to, I guess, send a wish out into the Ganges River. And so this is our group doing that. And then that night, we went on the same boat, and they had it decorated, and we went out to see the Festival of Lights at night, when, of course, there's fireworks and lots of lights. And then I put these other two pictures in just to explain that these cattle were everywhere. They're holy, so they just get the run of everywhere. You see these cattle, and all different kinds of cattle, not just the ones that look like this, but they're everywhere. And then this pile of wood here is wood that was used for cremation. So I found out that in Hindu society, you have a body within passing. So whether it's Diwali or not, if somebody passes away, they're going to be cremated. And of course, they do the cremation, if they can, at the Ganges River, because the Ganges is such a holy river. So apparently there are stations along the Ganges, not only in Varanasi, but upriver and probably downriver, where there are certain places that they will do these cremations. And so we actually saw cremation right kind of where we were putting our flowers into the water. There was an area that was mostly sand, and they were putting a body there for cremation. And out of respect for the person passing away, we didn't want to take pictures. And so we didn't, but it was a very moving experience. So here we are at night, going on the river, and I think I only show one picture of the Festival of Lights, but we cruised up and down the shoreline, lights everywhere, and huge projections on castles of like Hindu stories, and music, and all kinds of, it was just amazing. And there's no way I can capture what we saw, but this is kind of representative. So That was the Diwali Festival of Lights. Then the next day, we went to Sarnath, and this was a short bus ride from Varanasi to this site. Sarnath is for Buddhists a very important site because this is the place where the Buddha, after he attained his enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, came to Sarnath to find his former cohorts, people he had been seeking enlightenment with. This is where the first sermon or his first teaching of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And so this is kind of where Buddhism begins. And so this is just a big stupa. I don't think it has an inside to it. It's just this huge mound, but represents where he gave his first teaching. There's also a museum there, and we ran into a group of students who I wanted to get their pictures, so I did. Just a nice group of young men. And I don't have time to really explain some of what these two pictures are because it's getting late. So I'm going to maybe hold it for the adult discussion. And then this was on our way to Bodh Gaya. So we went from Varanasi, there's 6 hours on a bus, to Bodh Gaya. And of course, Bodh Gaya is important because that's where the Buddha attained his enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. This was another harrowing bus ride. And we encountered a situation where the entire highway was stopped dead. And that's because this is an election year in India. The Prime Minister stop in Varanasi. And so in order to protect him, they had all of traffic stopped. So we were on this highway that stretched miles and miles, and all the cars were stopped. So our bus driver and Raul decided, well, we're just going to go around this. So they went on the other side of the highway where oncoming traffic is going out, right? We rode for miles and miles on the wrong side of the road. And so we had all these cars, heading. But in India, their driving's crazy, and they're used to avoiding each other. They use their horn constantly. They see, somebody coming. Nobody's bothered by somebody coming at you head on. We had headlights coming at us constantly, but they just went around us. And we bypassed this gigantic traffic jam and got to Bodh Gaya, where we were headed. Eventually, this traffic jam was supposed to stop at 3 o'clock, but we just bypassed it all. It was crazy. And this happens to be a Thai temple that we passed on the way and stopped. I mean, it's not unusual to see these huge Buddhas, just kind of out in the middle of nowhere. But this is a temple, and it's of a Thai lineage. So here we are at Bodh Gaya. This is the temple, and this was originally erected by King Ashoka, who was the one who incorporated Buddhism into Indian society in the 3rd century BEC, so before the Common Era. Ashoka was responsible for the spread of Buddhism throughout India. He built pillars and things in commemoration of the Buddha. He separated the Buddha's relics, his ashes, into 80 pieces, and they built these pillars that represented Buddhism all throughout India. Anyway, this is Bodh Gaya. This was erected by Ashoka a long time ago. I think it was redone in the 6th or 7th century because it crumbled or got just. But this is a good example of early Indian stone architecture. And this is an example of a photo of the Bodhi tree. Again, we were not allowed to take our phones with us. So we had to leave everything that was electronic, but there are pictures on the web, and so this is exactly what we saw. This is not the Bodhi tree that the Buddha sat under 2,500 years ago, but it is related to that tree. This tree comes from a sapling that was sent at the time of the Buddha's existence. Ashoka had sent some cuttings to Sri Lanka, where a Bodhi tree was raised in Sri Lanka, and this is a direct descendant of that tree that came from Bodh Gaya. So they said this was the third Bodhi tree that has been in this place, but they were all descended from the original Bodhi tree that the Buddha sat under. So we sat in meditation around this tree. And I tried to do what Ricky did when he went to this place. He picked up Bodhi tree seeds when he was there. And I looked for them, because I was going to do the same thing you did. He brought back something like 20 or 30 seeds, and he got them to germinate. And now we have a lineage of Bodhi tree from India that are here in America. And he gave some of those seeds to the Huntington Library. So some of them are there. Ricky has some. I think Corey Kwan of the Venice Temple has some. So yeah, so we have this Bodhi tree here in Southern California. So I'm really excited. I'm actually going to try to get one for my garden. I have to talk to Corey Kwan or to Ricky. Anyway, so we saw the Bodhi tree. I'm close to the end, so hang in there. So then we went to the mountain, and this is called Praj Bodhi. This is the mountain where the cave is, where the Buddha sat, and I always wondered how long he sat practicing asceticism. And I did find online that he was supposedly practicing asceticism for 7 months in this cave. But the story that he ate 1 grain of rice, a day, I don't buy that. I mean, if he's surviving for 7 months, then he was eating something. But he was very created, and he was trying to attainment through an ascetic practice. So the cave is kind of at elevation, and some of our party couldn't. It's a little bit of a uphill and rough terrain, so some of us actually climb up to that cave. So they have these porters that will put you in this litter and carry you up to the cave. And so some of our members took advantage of that, and I thought, well, that's a pretty cool way to go. So that was available, and we saw lots of monkeys. And then this bottom picture is something called Sujata's Stupa. And we didn't see that. This is the place where, when the Buddha decided to give up his ascetic practice, he went down to the river, which probably was, they say it's like 5 kilometers or 3 miles down to the river, and he sat under a banyan tree. And apparently this is a very special tree, because Sujata, who was just a milkmaid, had made a promise or a wish at this banyan tree, and it had come true. And this is all legend, but she went back to the banyan tree to give thanks to the tree for having granted her wish, and she found the Buddha sitting there. So she thought that the banyan tree had created this human being to take her offering. And so the Buddha at this point had decided, I'm not going to continue with ascetic practices. There's got to be a different way in order to find insight. And so she is the one responsible for having given him nourishment and sustenance after he had made this decision. So we didn't have time to go see this, but it was close by to where we were, and I didn't know we didn't go there until afterwards. Otherwise, I would have said, maybe we should go see the Sujata Stupa, but I didn't know about that at the time. So here's the cave. Very small opening. I kind of bumped my head when I went in there, and the cave is, Ricky described it, and it's probably maybe small cave. It fits one body in there, and that's where he meditated. And so there's a statue there of an emaciated Buddha, and there's offerings, and sometimes they put, a garment around him, but basically this represents the Buddha during his ascetic practice, and it was a very special experience being in the cave. I went in first with, there was a lineup and there were a whole bunch of people in there, but then I waited a while, and I went in afterwards where it was just a couple and myself from our group, and then we were in this very quiet space, and it felt very, very magical and very special. So, Ricky, I totally agree that it meant a lot to be in that cave. Okay, so we're winding down. I'm getting to the end. We went to a place called Nalanda University, which is in Bodh Gaya. This represents a university that was ancient. Huge university. It was after the Buddha's life, but it was something like 10 square kilometers. And they've excavated 1 square kilometer. But it was a university that was Buddhist oriented. They had something like 108 classrooms or sections to it. And I asked our guide, do you know why it was 108? And he didn't know because he was Hindu. And so I explained to the group that 108 had to do with the 108 kleshas or defilements that each of us possess. It's just kind of something that we talk about in Buddhism. And that's why when we have a lot of our nenju, we'll have 108 beads to it to represent the 108 defilements that we supposedly all have. I mean, I have them. You probably do too. Anyway, there were 108 classrooms, and it was gorgeous and very ancient. And then the last thing I wanted to show you was this is a giant Buddha that was right around the corner from our hotel in Bodh Gaya, and it was put up fairly recently by a Japanese organization called Nippon Zan Myohoji. I think it's somewhat related to what form of Buddhism is it? Nichiren. Yes. So it's a form of Buddhism. This thing is huge. It's twice as tall as the Kamakura Buddha. Because I looked at it and people said, you think that's taller than the Kamakura Buddha? I said, absolutely. So online you can find out anything. And it's 75 meters, which is like 80 feet tall. It's huge and very beautiful. Okay, so I think Dharma school students are all gone by now. All right, so what I wanted to just kind of go through was 3 things, or three slides. First of all, things I learned about traveling to India: always carry toilet paper because you do not know how many times you needed it. And a lot of times you had to squat. So people who had trouble squatting were always looking for Western toilets. Japan was kind of like that, 30 years ago. I remember that. But brush your teeth with bottled water. You just really have to be careful with the water. So they had bottled water for us everywhere. The garlic naan and the chai masala tea was amazing. We mostly always just ate in the hotels. They always had buffets. Food was fantastic, but we weren't really brave enough to try getting street food, and I think that probably was a good decision. But it limited what we experienced, so that part was unfortunate. And I also ignore hawkers, but talk to people and ask questions. People are always willing to talk to you. And as I mentioned, honking and driving crazy was just everywhere. Only time we didn't have that was when we were on these long stretches of highway where there were no cars. But they have gigantic buses like the one we were in. They have cars. They have tuk-tuks. They have lots of motorcycles, people on bicycles. It's just crazy. There are several times where our bus driver, as assistant, and Raul had to get out to direct traffic to unsnarl a traffic jam because it was gridlock and we were just stuck. And so some of the things we didn't do was because it took us too long to get there. and the traffic was so bad. So that part was challenging. You just have to be patient. But but Bob said from the very beginning, be flexible and open to everything, and that's what the attitude you need to take to India. So what did Bob's Spiritual Seekers Tour mean to me? I found that India is complex, rich, difficult, and fascinating. So it's a combination of many things. It's not an easy place to go to, but infinitely fascinating. I had a spiritual encounter with 5 different religions while I was there. And of course, the Buddhist parts were most meaningful to me. An eye-opening experience to another world so different from mine. I felt kind of bad that I could just leave, but all those people stayed there and had to deal with the difficulties of life there. I mean, not for everybody. And I had just amazing gratitude for particularly Bob and Raul, who put this amazing trip together. A lot of thought went into itinerary we didn't always follow, and so I revised my itinerary based on what we actually did. And then lastly, what was most special for me, it deepened my connection to Buddhism, being able to see the places that were historically significant to Buddhism. Of course, my encounter with the Dalai Lama was magical, something I'll never forget. And then sharing this with my fellow travelers, the people in our group were amazing and really interesting. Didn't have time to talk about any of them, but it was so much fun getting to know them over those 3 weeks. And then lastly, being able to touch India through Bob's and Raul's heart and eyes, for me was really special. Of course, Raul loves his country and really relished being able to share it, and he was amazing as a tour guide. And then Bob, who is connected to an ashram in India, he's one of the very few India-certified yoga instructors in America. And he's connected to an ashram and is really trying to promote yoga and Buddhism in the United States. And he's actually trying to do that currently and is going to start a program next year with that. But Bob asked, well, would you come back again? And I had to think about that. I think I would, but knowing what I know now of the country, it's a challenging place to go. But I think well worth it, and I would encourage anyone to try. It's not maybe the first place you would ever think of going on your bucket list, but very enriching. And I didn't even go to the south, so I just was up in the north. So with that, I kind of took an hour. Sorry. We'll close. Please join me in Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.